Well, I'd like to welcome everybody who's joined us this afternoon for this webinar, Make Your Mark, Careers in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We're lucky to have some incredible people with us on this webinar who you can see now and who you'll get to know shortly. And of course, we would welcome the opportunity to get to know you a little bit after we've had a chat with the panel to learn a bit more about your interest in innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, a reminder that today's session will be recorded and shared post-event. And also, just a quick housekeeping note, just please keep your videos and microphones muted throughout this session. We will be taking questions at the end, as I said, so do feel free to use the Q&A function there to pop in questions as we go along. We'd really love to get into a conversation with you once we've heard from our wonderful panel. Now, my name is Madeleine Hanger and I will be your host for today's webinar. And I would firstly like to acknowledge the traditional lands on which we gather today, the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I would like to pay my respects on our behalf to their elders past and present and to all First Nations people of this incredible country we're lucky enough to live on. I'd particularly like to honour the many innovators and entrepreneurs of the First Nations, people who lived and learned and birthed and told stories across the estimated 60,000 years of their rich and continuous culture here. And I hope we'll all continue to find a way to forge a dual narrative and a more inclusive and representative nation. Now, I am coming to you here today from the Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship. For those who haven't been to the Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship, it's a leading centre for entrepreneurial training and education located at the University of Melbourne. It was established about 9 years ago, thanks to a generous gift from entrepreneur Peter Wade. And at this place, there's incredible programs that go on, including the University of Melbourne's Master of Entrepreneurship, the VC Catalyst program, which is an investor education program, and also our Upschool, which is where we teach teachers how to teach kids how to think like entrepreneurs. So plenty of things get started here. Now, tonight you're going to meet some extraordinary people who have graduated and or are currently studying the Master of Entrepreneurship. As I said, it is co-delivered here at the Wade Institute, and it's a program that's designed to equip you with the entrepreneurial skills, networks and mindsets to make your mark on the world. There are multiple career pathways off the back of that Masters, and again, you will hear about those in a moment. But it's where students learn about world-leading frameworks, toolkits and techniques to identify and successfully implement new business opportunities. Now, a little bit about me, because this webinar is not about me. I'll be simply moderating with these fabulous 5 people in front of you, but I'm a graduate of the Master of Entrepreneurship back in 2016. I also graduated from the VC Catalyst program in 2019, and I continue to invest in startups across the Australian ecosystem. I've used many of the skills, networks and knowledge that I've built at Wade as I've gone on to found 2 award-winning startups. And these days, I spend a lot of time in the media at the ABC, where I cover a lot on innovation and entrepreneurship. It's been an extraordinary ride, and I do get up every day pretty excited by the founders who are building our future from the ground up, including many who have started here in this place. Now, for today's webinar, I hope you know what you've signed up for. We, of course, are here to explore entrepreneurship and innovation in action and discover what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur or innovator in today's marketplace. You're going to hear from this panel about how they've cultivated an entrepreneurial mindset and those different career pathways that they've taken out from the Master of Entrepreneurship. So without further ado, I would love you to meet our panel, and instead of me introducing them, I'm going to let them do the good job of telling you about them. So let's start with you, Aaron. Tell us about your journey.
Hey everyone, my name's Aaron and I graduated the Master of Entrepreneurship at the end of 2023, so I'm relatively fresh out of it. And I came out of the program founding my own startup, Grapevine, that is helping people access more sustainable and ethical products to adopt into their lifestyles so they can live ultimately more responsible lifestyles holistically. And I'm also tutoring at Melbourne Uni in some marketing and management subjects on the side too.
Thanks, Aaron, and good to see you wearing the T-shirt. A good founder there, good marketing. And if people want to look up Grapevine, you could pop it in the chat, Aaron, if people want to have a look at the company. And I saw you start building that here at Wade Institute last year. So look forward to hearing more about that. Elle, let's hear about your journey.
Yeah, so I joined the Masters of Entrepreneurship with Mads back in 2016. I had been working as a strategy consultant, and while I loved working as a consultant, I hated being a consultant. So I wanted to shift across into entrepreneurship, and my degree really helped me do that. I ran my own startup for 2.5 years straight out of the master's degree. I then joined a DevOps startup as employee number 8 and their first non-software engineer. And I ended up as chief of staff after 4 years when the company hit 120 people. And I've now jumped across to another new tech DevOps startup to do the same thing again. I'm employee number 6 and chief of staff.
So you like riding rocket ships?
I do. It's so much fun.
It sounds like it. Fantastic. Look forward to deep diving that a bit later. Godwin, welcome. Tell us a little bit about your journey to date.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. I did the Master of Entrepreneurship in 2018, and that was a great time. And in the many years since then, while my startup that I didn't continue, I found my way into consulting. And that's been great because the particular reason that I've gone in that direction is so that I can be close to the problems that many of our clients and customers are solving in the industry. So it's an awesome way to get in touch with heaps of different industries, heaps of different clients, solving different problems. In my case, particularly in data, automation and AI. And I'm doing that now and look forward to keep doing that and use a lot of the skills that I still have from the masters. So, yeah.
Great, Godwin. And I'm sure there's people who are joining us who are quite interested in the entrepreneurship and innovation pathway. Certainly I share some of that as well. So let's unpack that a bit later. Christian, let's go to you. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Hey everyone, so my name's Christian. I'm a current Masters of Entrepreneurship student, so I'm in the trenches at the moment, about to finish off in a few weeks. A bit about my career journey. I started off as a consultant previously, but was looking for a bit of a pivot and a bit of a change in my life, so I ended up in the Masters of Entrepreneurship program. I also ended up moving to Melbourne as well, fantastic place. So I currently found Achievable, so we empower students who struggle with maths to change their behaviour and improve their confidence through regular motivated practice. And we're also part of the Melbourne University Incubator Program, Innovator as well. So we're in the trenches of what it's like to be part of the university incubation program. So yeah, it's been super exciting. So I can't wait to tell you all about it.
You look pretty chipper for being in the trenches. And I'm also a past participant of the Innovated program, and it'd be good for us to, again, talk a bit more about that later on. But first, we need to hear from Claire. Tell us about your journey.
Oh, thanks, Matt, and good afternoon or evening, everyone. I started the Master of Entrepreneurship with Godwin in 2018. I completed the course in 2 years. I started while pregnant and finished with a newborn. But my background was I'm a medical researcher. I was working in the commercialisation and business development of early stage research at WEHI, which is a medical research institute, and I really wanted to develop those entrepreneurial skills and apply them to some of those projects to take them from, the lab bench to the bedside. And I really enjoyed that journey and learned a lot that I could apply to not just a startup, but a spin out kind of venture through the masters. And I'm now the Deputy CEO and Director of Research Translation and Commercialisation at a digital health research centre.
Fantastic. So you can see, to all of you who are with us, that we've got a really varied set of thinkers and doers here on the call. And I think no entrepreneur or intrapreneur is the same. There's often quite a dynamic journey that sits behind that. Speaking of, Eleanor, having known you for a number of years now, having started out together at Wade Institute many years ago, you were originally in strategy before that. What inspired you to take the leap to sort of pursue this career in entrepreneurship or innovation?
Strategy consulting is a really odd space where you're often brought in after people know that there's already a problem. And so it was really nice to have the opportunity to try and get in front of that 8 ball and to, make and solve your own problems instead. There's also something really nice about building ideas from the ground. So I actually started my career at IBM as a strategy consultant. And at the time, IBM had 400,000 employees worldwide. So your ability to make an impact was really small. You were a very small cog in a very big machine. And it's really nice to have the opportunity to see the impact of your work in a much more direct way.
Is that because of the hands-on nature of startups, where you're just building every day, you're putting another brick in place to build the house, let's say, as opposed to a big company, the house is there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the stories I sometimes tell is at BuildKite, I hadn't been there for very long. We were in the process of closing Airbnb as a customer, which was huge and incredibly exciting. And I was like, I'm just going to check our sales contract, before we sign and before everything's done, to make sure that we have everything we needed. And I realized we didn't have the level of cyber and product insurance that we were going to agree to within the contract. So I called an insurance broker friend of mine, and he was like, yeah, I can absolutely help you out. Can you just send over your financial model and your business plan? And I was like, if you give me 2 weeks to actually make those, then I can absolutely send over our business plan and financial model. So there's something about being at a startup where you really get to build everything from the ground and make it how you think it's best practice. That is really, it's really fun and it's really exciting.
It's that whole sort of build the plane while you're flying it sort of concept, isn't it? Godwin, you've had experience as well of this entrepreneurship or innovation pathway. You've been a consultant. Can you explain a little bit how you see the world of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship meeting inside a big company?
Yeah, sure. I often like to think of it with two levers when I do the consulting. It's bringing the value proposition to our clients, and it's bringing the work of being efficient. So, you can go out there to the clients and utilize adding value so that they feel like their product offering or the service that you are providing to them is enhanced, has new meaning, has new value. Or you can go out and pull those levers on the efficiency side, whether you're trying to save cost, whether you're trying to utilize AI, automation, or other aspects to make the process the existing process that they're doing, make that more efficient, and at the end of the day, benefit them and their business. And both those things very much were picked up during the Masters.
And just to stay with you for a moment, Godwin, this idea of an entrepreneurial mindset, we hear a lot about this. We know the education system increasingly is trying to equip students with this. Do you think today's employers, or certainly yours, values this entrepreneurial mindset as a core capability?
Absolutely. I have no doubt that I have my role in consulting because I have this Masters, because at the end of the day, what they wanted to see is that I can actually approach problems from not just a traditional sort of business management, commerce undergrad sort of approach, but rather think about it in my own words, almost like with a sense of the lean methodology. It's how can I do more with less?
And for lean methodology, for those who are joining us, and I'm not going to assume knowledge, but you may already know what it is, I'm going to get Aaron to describe what lean methodology is. Did I throw you under a bus then or not?
Potentially. Well, I like to reflect it in terms of effectual versus causal thinking, which are, again, another two terms which I'll explain. But effectual thinking is where you see an infinite number of imagined ends from what you have currently, as opposed to saying, I have a whole bunch of things and I'm going to use them all to make one single imagined end. And the entrepreneur is always thinking effectually, where I have to take what I have currently and use that to obtain any number of potential infinite ends. And within that, you have to also think via a lean framework, where you are constantly pivoting and iterating based on feedback that you're getting on almost a weekly basis, and that you don't tie yourself to a singular solution, because that is causal thinking, where you're too oriented on creating one single thing that potentially doesn't solve the problems you're looking at. So being lean and being open to adaptability, being agile, and utilizing the resources you have in an incredibly efficient way is beyond important in the entrepreneurial space. And particularly for myself, where I'm just out of university and don't have massive amounts of resources behind me financially, as well as a team, and time myself with working and tutoring, I have to be willing to be open to utilizing resources in the best way possible, and being lean in saying that I shouldn't be too committed to one idea in general because my time is valuable. And so I need to pivot as soon as I hear feedback that tells me my assumptions are wrong.
Right. Thanks for explaining that. And Claire, I'm interested, your background, as you explained to us earlier, is come more from that research, more traditional sort of background, let's say. You had a baby in between studying the Masters. Why did you decide to take the leap? Did you want to make your mark? Was there some curiosity driving you? Why did you decide to come out of a more traditional environment with a known trajectory and want to step into this world of innovation and entrepreneurship?
I think there are a lot of parallels between scientific research and the entrepreneurial approach. You, as a scientist, you have a hypothesis and then you test that and gather evidence to support your hypothesis. And I think that's a lot that has a lot of similarities to the entrepreneurial approach, where you come up with a solution to the solution to a problem. And that's another similarity with science. You tend to really know an area very deeply, which I think is really important as an entrepreneur as well. And then you start to test your assumptions. And I think that's something I did while I was doing experiments in the laboratory, and it's something that I do every day now in terms of what has to be true for this idea to go somewhere, and that you're just iteratively assessing, testing those assumptions and trying to make your idea work.
And validation and customer validation or problem validation is a very big part, of course, of entrepreneurship, and proving out those assumptions inside a business model. Christian, you are in the trenches. Your words for in the middle of the Masters or about to complete it. Tell us about that for you, this idea of finding sort of proving out a problem. How important is that to entrepreneurship and business model creation?
No, very important. I think that you get taught is you should spend at least 80% of your time trying to make sure you get the problem right. Because otherwise, if you don't know what the problem is, how can you create the solution? So I think I came into the program, I'll be honest, quite naively, thinking I knew exactly what students needed. And one thing that came pretty apparent was when we actually went into the classroom. So we got out of the classroom out of the classroom into another classroom, I should say, into a high school classroom. And we went and asked these students directly, going, what's stopping you from achieving your best? What do you hate about maths? What do you dislike? What's not motivating you? And that to us really told us a different story about what we thought the problems were. Because we come with all our different biases and assumptions into thinking what the problem is. But at the end of the day, it's the users and the customers that tell you what the problem really is. So validation to me is actually getting out of the building and talking with people, talking directly with them, saying, what's frustrating you? What's making you frustrated? What's making you angry? How can we help fix that? And, entrepreneurship is all about fixing problems. Otherwise, if you don't fix a problem, then why would anyone give you any money or pay for you to solve that problem?
Yeah, and I think there's a famous saying from Ashmura, fall in love with the problem, not the solution, which is so many people make things that people don't want. And the whole point is to prove that you are, solving for pain points, either from hearing that from people or sometimes from chickens. Stay with me. Eleanor, your startup Mimic Tech was focused on the poultry business. What problem did you find and what did you set out to solve?
So, the poultry industry meat is the most commonly eaten meat. Chicken is the most commonly eaten meat in the world, but chickens and the poultry industry has quite a poor reputation in terms of animal welfare and farming outcomes. So we were looking at ways to try to improve farming outcomes by making farming more ethical. So at the moment, you can't rear chicks with their hen for a whole bunch of reasons, including biosecurity, stocking density, and territorialism. But it means that chicks never receive maternal care. So we were trying to use robots to recreate core features of maternal care for chicks on commercial poultry farms. So it was a bit of an odd idea that came from my co-founder, who was also part of the first cohort. So she was the product and I was the business. And we were able to raise about $1 million in funding to try and get the product off the ground. And we built relationships with Hazeldene's and Ingham's. Unfortunately, we did hit the COVID lockdowns and ran out of money, so the startup didn't survive. But I think it's really important to try and have innovation in spaces like that, because food is increasingly under threat from things like climate change, and it's important to know where our food comes from and to make it as ethical as possible.
And I suppose it's a good example with Mimic Tech. We know most startups fail, or the market fails, or it's timing, or it's traction. There are multiple reasons that some startups don't survive. But what you did demonstrate, though, is taking an idea or a problem that you identified out into the market and managed to commercialize that problem. Claire, just tapping back into your career, where we see Australia's track record of research commercialization has some way to go. We do a very good job at ideas, but probably need to do better around wrapping them into a business model to get them out into a commercially successful venture. In what ways does sort of the mindsets and toolkits that you have developed through your entrepreneurial learning helped you to better see problems or IP that could be sitting inside a lab to be able to see where it could find a market?
I think it's shifting your perspective from the value proposition as a researcher to what the value proposition is from within a commercial landscape. And so, I mean, one good example of that is when you're writing a research grant, you typically write that, your research has the potential to cure cancer for a large number of people or something like that, but that doesn't dig into what's your target addressable market, how are you going to scale and things like that. And they're the questions that you really need to be thinking about from a commercial perspective, and who's going to pay and all those questions, which are not important when you're doing discovery research, but when you're kind of thinking about how you take that discovery about how two molecules interact and may inhibit the progression of cancer, how do you take that to the market? How do you get that into people to improve people's lives? Then you have to shift your perspective and think about it from that commercial point of view. And, I think that I work a lot with researchers, and use the business model canvas and things like that to kind of just work through that change in mindset and perspective.
Great. And I will get perhaps Aaron to explain the business model canvas, or Christian, or you could do a joint explanation for those who aren't familiar in a moment. But we've turned the Q&A on. Apologies, that wasn't on before. If you've got questions, we'd absolutely love to hear them. Please just click on the Q&A down the bottom there and pop the questions in the chat, and we'll be coming to you shortly to tap into some of those, which will be great. So Aaron or Christian, take the conch. Who'd like to explain what the business model canvas is?
Yeah, don't mind. I can chime in there. It is essentially a strategic tool that allows you to plot out your entire business and all the assumptions around it across different categories, where your value proposition is centered in the middle, and then to the bottom of it, is your costs and revenues. To the left are things like your activities and resources, and then to the right are things like your channels and customer segments. And in your early stages, it is really a tool to map out all your assumptions of how the entire business is going to work, to say, well, I envision this really well-functioning, well-oiled machine-like business working, all these different components that need to mesh together to function. What are the assumptions around that? What am I assuming will be the types of value delivered that are central to the business? Stemming off of that, who are my assumed customers, and will they be receptive to my offering? Will they be coming through the channels I think they'll be coming through? So I need to map all them out. What resources do I have on hand at the moment, and in what manner do I deliver them? So it's essentially a tool that I use in my everyday practice as well. Not that you spend weeks perfecting it and you have to write out this thing that is perfect and concrete, but every day, in the sense that you just write down your assumptions for what you think a pivot might look like, or you map out your current state of the business on a really quick business model canvas. If you just look it up now on Google, you can download one from Strategizer. So yeah, it's a tool that is essential in everyday aspects of the business, just to get your thoughts about what you're doing down into actual tangible actions, because a goal written down is a goal halved in some senses, and you want to make sure that what's in your mind floating around actually ends up becoming tangible action, and translating that into a written canvas that structures your thoughts is incredibly important.
Absolutely. And Aaron takes no kickbacks from Strategizer. That was very well explained. Godwin or Claire, do you use a tool like this? Maybe Godwin, I'll throw to you. Do you use tools like that to sort of prove out business cases inside your business as part of your corporate consulting? Or what sort of entrepreneurship tools do you use as part of your planning for other businesses?
I'd say that not so much the business model canvas directly anymore, but more the value proposition. If you take the centerpiece that Aaron was talking about and enlarge that and break that down into the different segments and the different target markets and the different, in my space, we refer to it as the client, but the client has their own customers. So, we want to be thinking almost 2 steps ahead and going, well, not just serving you, the client, to make you happy, but also making your customers happy, because that then comes back to them. So I'd say it's the value proposition at large. That tool is the one that puts you in the best place in the corporate space.
Mm-hmm. Great. And again, I'll just stay with you for a sec, Godwin. What advice would you give to someone? There might be some people with us on the call who are sort of looking to leverage their unique strengths or skills that they might have in an existing role to take that sort of step into an innovation or entrepreneurship pathway. What advice would you give to them around those two worlds?
I'd say think about how you can almost take a problem within your business or within the area that you're working, whether that's a problem for who you're serving or an internal problem, and think about how you can solve it. I'm come back to my 2 points. It's either increase the value or make the process more efficient. Either one of the two, and often that the two combined for sure will lead, or the same outcome can be achieved. But those are the two almost environments that I think from, and I think that's incredibly helpful when you approach it in this way.
Great. And Christian, being in the middle of the program, or you're about to graduate shortly, tell us a little bit about what the experience has been like inside the program using some of these toolkits that you're developing, and where you're at and where you're about to go, as far as you know.
I couldn't tell you what the 5-year plan is, because I think anyone in the startup world would tell you that things change rapidly and are so fast moving. But in terms of the experience of the program, look, I think Aaron touched on the business model canvas, and I think what's really great about the program is, look, you can look up business model canvas on Strategizer and get all of our toolkit. But the real value of the program is you're getting experts and mentors to really test your assumptions and saying, why do you think this way? Why do you think you're thinking in this particular way? It's not like a particular, like for those who have done, university courses, you typically write a theory about this is what I think will happen and so forth. Here's some academic references. This program is completely different in the sense that you'll provide your assumptions, and then the next step is literally you go out of the classroom and you go and see, is this true? And that's where the real learning happens. They really encourage you to really get out and be in the real world and learn from those customers. So it's a very hands-on master's program. There's no exams. There's mainly kind of assignments that are reflected on your startup or your innovation challenge, whether if you're in an entrepreneurship space. So from that perspective, it's been really great to see what you're learning in class. You're thinking about, how does this apply to my business? How does this change my way of thinking? So it's, for those who love practicality, it's fantastic. You don't get much of the value in the program if you're there for just the theory. You get a lot of value in the program if you're there for the mentoring, the expertise, and learning from others. So you get a lot of guest lecturers. As a matter of fact, today we had the CEO of Body Fit Training come in and give a talk to us and CEO of over, I think, over 800 franchises of similar to like F45 around the world, and talk us, in a class of 20, going, this is my journey on how I've created this business.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how hard it was to book a meeting with this guy? And he's coming in, Richard was his name, coming in and just talking to us. And we've had that from experts around different sort of areas, from Google all the way to cafes, all the way to different tech startups. So having that opportunity to ask some big questions to people who've been there and done that is just so amazing.
Yeah, I think that role of mentorship is so fundamental, but also connecting to the ecosystem, to something much bigger than you, and learning from those who have gone before. Claire, I'd love to hear from you how the broader innovation or entrepreneurial ecosystem has helped you as you've stepped out beyond the lab, let's say.
That's a really good question. I think that certainly doing the Master of Entrepreneurship exposed me to the ecosystem in a way that I probably wouldn't have had immediate access to before. I was really in my kind of science bubble, and getting into that broader network, speaking directly with partners in venture capital and other accelerator and incubator programs and things like that was not something that I had immediate access to prior to doing the Masters of Entrepreneurship. So I really got a lot out of those connections and introductions to that network. I think in terms of one thing, just reflecting on some of the comments made by Christian and others, what one of the great values in the Master of Entrepreneurships is it gives you kind of you learn through your mistakes, and you do you work on kind of like the startup approach in 3 times, or at least I did. You do it sort of a very short one and then twice again, and each time you learn more and more about the approach and how to do it better, not just from a theoretical perspective, but a practical one, like how you're going to do it. And that's not something that you can really learn. I mean, so immediately, I think, in another environment or through another program. So that's a differentiator, and that's something that when I reflect on it, is you value in retrospect. It's hard and challenging at the time, but probably a unique kind of element of value, at least for me, part of the Master of Entrepreneurship program.
Great. And Elle, what about you? You obviously had that ecosystem around you when you were building your company and as you went on to build Kite. What's a key skill that you've taken forward through all this company journey?
I think it's less about particular skills, and for me, it's been more about a mindset. And Wade really allowed me to just sit in a space of entrepreneurship for a year and expose myself to the different versions of what that could mean, and to find a way that it made sense for me to do. So things like working out how to pitch myself in a way that felt authentic and was still putting my best foot forward, working out what a pitch could mean if I was talking to farmers or customers versus investors and our board, and working out how to know when was the right time to do what. And it's just about feeling comfortable in that space of ambiguity, because startups are always changing. As I think it was Christian said, like, I don't have a 5-year plan. I have no idea what Factor House will look like in 5 years. I'd love to be, a huge unicorn and the CEO and highly successful. But, if we're honest, there's a 50-50 chance that this company may not work as much as I'm going to put all my effort towards it working. So for me, the mindset that I learned through the Masters of Entrepreneurship was about being comfortable with that uncertainty and working out what it is that I find so motivating and exciting within careers in startups, whether it's as an entrepreneur or intrapreneur.
Or something in between.
Or something in between, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, that mindset, because of course you can carry that through any kind of career pathway, can't you? What about you, Aaron? What do you think is the key skill set or mindset that has carried you through to now in your journey with Grapevine?
Yeah, again, I would say it's less of a specific skill, and carrying forward from what Eleanor said with mindset, I would base my answer around it being an identity that I took out of the program, in that in my case, I'd transitioned straight from my bachelor's into the master's, and I was still a student in my mind, still very much unaware of any sort of industry experience, felt that I didn't embody any sort of expertise, and I didn't feel confident really to be within a room full of people who had, been a part of some sort of industry or sector for a number of years. It felt like imposter syndrome for me at that time. And so coming into the program and, the 18-month journey that I'd gone through, coming out of it was sort of like a car wash, right? You go in dirty and you come out like this brand new, clean version of yourself. But in the sense that
Tesla? Did you come out of Tesla, or
yeah, I went in a rust bucket that was running on fossil fuels and came out of Tesla. But it's this self-belief that you can't really describe until you experience it, and it's not an epiphany moment per se, but it's this this self-efficacy that continues to reinvigorate you every morning, that you feel as though you have the skills to back yourself in times when you're uncertain. You have the confidence to enter a room full of people you have no idea about, and approach them not from a perspective of wanting to onboard them as customers, but to have a conversation about who you are and what your journey has been as well. And it's an intangible thing that is so important to foster from an educational perspective, but from a future focus on whatever aspect of life you end up in, whatever career you end up within. Your identity will be formed around someone who can problem solve in an expert manner and in an effectual and entrepreneurial manner, above and beyond someone who hasn't had this education. And so even if you don't go on to be a founder, or even if I don't go on to be a lifetime founder, I know that whatever I end up in, I will have that self-belief and identity reinforcing me. And you can't put a price on that, really. It's insanely valuable.
Thanks for sharing that. It sounds like it was really transformative for you in terms of your own self-efficacy, as you've said. Christian, you are about to emerge from the program shortly. Do you feel different from when you came in? Do you feel like it has transformed the way you see yourself and your own capabilities in some way, similar to Aaron?
Yeah. I think I came into the program probably a bit naive and thinking how easy entrepreneurship would be, and then coming out of the program, it's kind of reshaped how I thought about it. I always thought about entrepreneurship as building, I build the best product, and then once I get the best product, people will just come screaming out my door and wanting to form a wait list. But it's almost coming out of the program that's kind of reshaped how I thought about the whole process. It's actually being overly curious and being overly curious about what your customers or what your users' problems are, and just questioning how to behave, why to do such a thing. And there's still a long way for us to go. I think I'm excited because we've got another school visit coming up, and I've got more questions, and just being overly overly curious about how they behave and respond to different things. So that was definitely a mindset shift. I used to think it was all about products. It's actually more about really being curious about the problem and then responding with the product afterwards.
And we do know certain companies, whether that is Airbnb or whatever, are constantly iterating. There's this constant process of iterating to meet the customer's needs. It's not a set and forget, build the thing and they will come. Exactly. It's a constant process of being curious about how can you solve that problem better. Is that, in your experience, Claire, is that something that you use when you think about commercialization of some of the solutions you're looking at? I know they're probably big markets, but how do you think about that, meeting the problem and solution, making them a good fit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I've always worked in the kind of medical and healthcare space, and so you're always thinking about the payer and the end user are often not the same thing. So that's quite a different sort of approach in terms of understanding who will pay versus whose problem you're solving. But yeah, having that deep understanding of the patient and the clinician in digital health, we're constantly asking, yes, this sounds like a great one problem solution, but how's it going to fit into the everyday workflow? There's so many questions, regulatory approval, all the rest of it, but it's going deep into understanding the problem, understanding how people try to address that problem today, and then how does your solution differentiate from that, is something I think about and deal with every day. So it's hugely stimulating to work with so many motivated researchers and take those problems, those proof of concepts that they've worked so hard on in research and take them to the real world.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that you are in there trying to unlock IP to get it out into the market. That's very exciting, and look forward to seeing what you do. Before we go to, we've got some fantastic questions in the Q&A. Again, I'd encourage you to pop any of your wonderings or learnings. Let's take a bit of Christian's medicine and move toward your curiosity. We'd love to hear any of your questions, and we'll have a couple of people joining us in a moment from the University of Melbourne and from the Wade Institute, so we can open the floor to more questions. But please pop them into the Q&A and we'll be with you in about a couple of minutes. Before we jump to the questions, just want to do a quick whip around to our 5 wonderful panelists and say, what do you think your biggest superpower is, where we think about entrepreneurial or innovation mindsets or toolkits? What do you think your biggest superpower is and that you use day to day in your work? I'll start with Godwin.
Sure. I in my space right now in consulting, I'm working a lot with data management, data process, data automation, and AI all the time, all the place. So I tap into the efficiency thing, and that certainly would be the closest thing to I have to a superpower, is how can we constantly iterate on the process, the existing process that our clients use? How can we make that better? How can we make it run faster? How can we remove the bottlenecks, reduce the manual workload, so that it goes from A to B in a better way and faster?
I think there's a Japanese term called Kaizen, which means continuous improvement.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Maybe that's you. Your superpower is Kaizen. All right. What about you, Eleanor?
I think my biggest superpower is I'm really good at breaking big problems up into small manageable things. It's one of those sayings, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And I think that's really what a startup is. You can't get overwhelmed by the sheer scale of work that always needs to be done. You just have to work out what's the next helpful thing to do. And I think that's what my superpower is.
So is it prioritization?
I don't know that it's prioritization. I think that's definitely part of it, but it's okay, well, sure, we're about to close Airbnb, but what does that actually mean? And how can I help make that a success? And then being like, oh, well, has anyone actually read the sales contract? Maybe that's a helpful thing that I can go and do. And now I've read the sales contract, actually, we need to do this thing. And then to get insurance, okay, we also need to do these 4 other things. And so it's I think to Christian's point, it's that curiosity, and it's tugging on a loose thread and working out how you can help make the carpet better.
Fantastic. All right, Claire, what about you? What's your superpower?
I think I always think I'm like Dory, just keep swimming. I think that it's so easy to kind of just get a static inertia. You just can't, so everything's so big, you can't get started, but just keep going. But also head in the clouds, feet on the ground. Like it's easy to kind of get carried away with a big vision and never take the first steps. So like break it, as Elle was saying, break it down. Like what is next? What's next? What's next? And if there is a roadblock, how do you get around it? But just keep going.
Fantastic. And in the interest of time, Christian, can I assume yours is curiosity?
That's right. Hang on.
Excellent, because that was just bursting off you, so that's great. And Aaron, what's yours?
I would say my superpower in general is being articulate, I guess. And then when people ask me about that, I say, well, yes, I'm loquacious. And then they go, what does that mean? I say, well, I talk a lot. And, you know, hence I want a guest speaker panel. But I find the way that translates into a startup is that it ends up in this attention to detail mindset where I can not only explain things quite thoroughly to clients and customers to get that value offering across, and they can understand, well, what is it that you're exactly doing and how do I involve myself in this and what's in it for me? It also translates into things like the business model canvas, the value proposition canvas, where I'm always jotting down my thoughts into, you know, extensive note form on documents so that everything is there ready for me to kind of strategize beyond just what's the thoughts in my head are to actually having plans on paper.
Fantastic. Thank you. You are very eloquent. A great orator, and that communication skill is fundamental, as you say, to translate your ideas so people understand what you're working on and what you're building. Now, thank you for all your insights. We've raced through that time, and we'd like to meet our audience now, certainly through the Q&A. I'd also like to welcome two people into our Brady Bunch room here. One of them is May Fleming, who is the program manager for the Master of Entrepreneurship. May is the absolute workhouse and wheelhouse behind the day-to-day program that runs. And also I'd love to welcome Simon Reichelt from the University of Melbourne. He is from the student recruitment team and has a different background to us. Simon, welcome into the room. We've got a whole lot of questions here that have come through. One of them is someone's asking, how is this program, this Master of Entrepreneurship at the University of Melbourne structured? Is it in person and working with a group or a business or a startup? Perhaps, May, would you like to explain a little bit about how the program's structured from that point of view?
Yeah, sure. So yes, it's an academic program at University of Melbourne. So you've got the academic rigor, but you've got the practical application through the subjects as well. And like I think Christian mentioned, there's no exams unless you have an elective that has a subject that's a breadth subject that has an exam attached to it. So it's very much case studies, working on a lot of groups. And what you learn through working in diverse groups is actually about leadership, how to work. And you always, whether you work in a career, an organization, or in startup, and that's one of the startup failures, is also team breakups and, you know, working as a team. So it builds, I think the program also helps build you in a more holistic way. So it's not just about entrepreneurship learning, but it's also self. And we actually do have a subject called the Entrepreneur Within. So you're actually developing your the more softer skill sets as well, because to be an entrepreneur, these are some of the things that you need to learn: how to deal with ambiguity, building resilience, dealing with bias, all these different things. So it's a very holistic, comprehensive kind of program. And there's a lot of moments as well that maybe wasn't mentioned, the feedback loop. So we have I'm a dedicated program manager. So I started in 2018. So I've got quite a few cohorts under my belt now. And my role is actually looking after everything from student experience right through. I'm usually the first person you meet and right through to alumni engagement. So, and what else can I share is also the feedback loop. So we've got a dedicated mentor, and that's quite special. So aside from doing an academic program, you almost have these incubator-like elements to it to support you if you want to build an idea during the program and continue on, which many of our students and alumni have done. We do things aside from guest speakers. We actually curate feedback panels. So we actually bring in people from the ecosystem. We bring alumni in that have walked the path, and you're getting feedback and different perspectives on, and gives you thoughtful questions about how you can think through the approach. And that helps you with the next few week sprint as you're developing your idea.
Right.
I hope that helps answer that question.
I think that's great. And I'm sure there might be some other questions. There's one that's popped into the chat and it taps into a little bit to what you're saying. And thanks for your question, whoever's popped it in there. And the question is, what are the benefits of this structured program with academia and hands-on, rather than just creating your own startup, i.e. entrepreneurship via self-learning? I think I'll throw that to...
Could I answer that question, Matt? Or...
Christian, please do.
Yeah, because I think this is a good question, and I think if you if you think about the entrepreneurship by self-learning, you're talking about just a small part of it, which is the theory. And I would say that the program benefit is beyond just a theory. It's really, you're learning from experts. And I'll give you an example. I catch up quite regularly with one of our previous lecturers, Norman, who's an ex managing director at a strategy consulting firm, IBM, Accenture. There'd be no way, Jose, I'd be able to catch up with this person in another form or fashion. Yet I still have coffees with him to discuss my key concerns, discuss my personal issues with my startup and what's going on there. It's really that connection with experts. You're also learning from peers as well. So in typical undergraduate, courses, you're filled with hundreds of other people. But here, you're actually with the same cohort throughout the entire journey. So you actually really get to bond with one another and really talk with others on how their startup is going, what challenges they're facing, and really learn from each other as well. Because entrepreneurship can be, it's very hard, and it's even more harder if you're alone doing it. So might as well give yourself the best chance possible. And then the last thing is, it's really you got this really amazing space where you got this co-working space we can work out of, and that's also bringing in different networks. So there's different venture capitalists coming in. There's other startups in the room, and the mentors. It's really, to be honest, the theory is a small part of it. It's really that learning from others is probably the most valuable part of it, because there's people who've been there, they've done that. You're learning from the years of experience, and if that saves you a bit of time in the process and helps you with your own personal issues, it helps make that chance of success even higher.
Some people, there's obviously some accelerators around, or these sort of short courses that you can do, and so I think it's probably a good question where people try and understand, why would I take that leap into the masters? Aaron, what's your thought on that in terms of the benefits of a structured program as opposed to just learning on your own?
Yeah, I think it means that you don't kind of lie to yourself and waste your own time. That if you go it alone, you can get stuck in analysis paralysis because you don't know where to begin. You've got no one to ask as to, is this the right direction to go in? And you can often kind of end up, floundering in the water, so to speak. That when you're in a structured program, you'll move through it in a way that you feel as though you're making progress with a venture that perhaps you start and then finish in the course of a subject, or one that you start and then continue on outside of the masters that I've done. You feel as though you're actually taking tangible steps towards building something, and each one is only more positively reinforcing than the last. That you do some customer interviews and you feel like you've found out there's a problem, and then you translate that into the design of an MVP and then test that with customers again, and you get great responses, and it feels like you can progress to the next step. Whereas outside of that environment, well, A, you don't have the mentors to guide you through whether you're actually correctly taking those steps, but B, it's a bit more ambiguous as to the direction that you're actually going with this, and you can end up spending twice or three times as long on a simple process of building an MVP that if you were within a structured environment that is telling you the right way to go about it and giving you the right people to talk about creating it with, then you are saving your own time as well as building a network that is invaluable and with you for life. And building that identity that I talked about before. So that structure itself is, I think, essential to preserving your own timeline as well.
Fantastic. And again, sort of, I suppose, tapping into that value, that greater value or the compound value of the ecosystem that surrounds you, so that you have got people cheering for you as you move forward in your entrepreneurial ventures. I've got another question, and beyond that, I might throw to you, Simon, just to talk a little bit more about the application process and some of the key dates that are coming up. So for those still on the line, thanks for still being with us and for your questions. There's a question here from someone who says they're currently working in an industry that is not business related at all. But they're interested in this program because they want to kick off a startup. They're at a mid-career switch. And they're wondering if it's challenging to switch over. Have there been past participants with a similar background? Now, we're not quite sure what your background is. You might want to put it in the chat. It's an industry that's not business related, but if you want to share that, great. But maybe Simon, anyone would you like to answer that in terms of the previous cohorts?
Yeah, the cohorts have been very diverse, and yes, you have those that come from business backgrounds, but we've had actors, neuroscientists, medical researchers like Claire, social workers, lawyers, doctors, like it's so broad, and entrepreneurship is applied to any field. And the richness of the diversity is that you're coming with different perspectives and contributing to that. The youngest, straight out of undergrad, so what is that, 21, 22? The oldest student we've had is 63. But I would say it depends. Each cohort's different, but they probably range about 28 in age. But there's been a lot of like career changes and different reasons for doing the program. Either you want a career change, you see a problem in industry and you want to do something about it. You come from an entrepreneurial family and now you want to innovate the business model. You've worked a few years and thought, no, this life is not for me. I want to be my own boss and do things my way, make an impact. So it's a bunch of different reasons why people would make the switch. And, part-time is also an option if you're a domestic student like Claire did, she was working. So there's option to do it full-time, part-time. And happy to sit down and have a chat about the timetable and how it might work for you as well.
Yeah, it's certainly flexible. I have 4 children. I had 4 children when I did the master's degree, so and was working as well. So I think it's there's certainly flexibility, and I'd encourage you to reach out to May, or perhaps your email or information will be sent out after the webinar for those who'd like to learn more. Simon, I might, with a few minutes left, just ask you if you could explain a bit more about the key dates coming up for applications for anyone who might be interested.
Of course, thank you. So just to note for everyone who is interested in studying the Master of Entrepreneurship 1-year program, there are some key dates coming up in terms of when the applications are due for the program. So if you are a domestic student, you need to have your applications in by the 30th of November to start the February 2025 intake. And if you are an international student, you need to have that application in by the 31st of October, so a month earlier than the domestic cohort.
Great. Okay. And again, there'll be information about that available for those of you considering applying. So we're nearly up on the hour. I'm sure everyone would like to get on with their evening or their dinner. I do thank you again very much for your time. Time is precious, not just to entrepreneurs, but to all of you who have joined us and given us your time on the webinar today. I'd especially like to thank our wonderful panelists, Eleanor, Godwin, Aaron, Claire, and Christian, and wish you the best in your future endeavours, including, Christian, your upcoming graduation. And Aaron, we look forward to seeing where you take Grapevine, and we should keep an eye on that as that startup grows. If you'd like to keep an eye on the event calendar, Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship have multiple events running throughout the year, so do keep an eye. You can sign up for the newsletter or jump on the website and see all of the exciting things that are happening across all the different programs. If you know someone who might be interested in joining the Wade Institute's programs, feel free to share details. We're always happy to talk to you. But thank you again for joining us for Make Your Mark Careers in Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and we wish you all a wonderful evening.